Oh, God.
Good morning and namaste to all of you. Let's start our class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswah, Tatsavitravare Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto ma sadgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, mrityor ma amritam gamya. Om sehna bhavatu, sehno bhavatu, saviryam karvavahi, tejasvinavadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahi. Om shanti 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 om. So last week we learned about this technique, which Rishi Patanjali is calling pratipakshabhavanam, to cultivate the firmness in these yam and the niyams. It's very easy to say that we are non-violent and we tell the truth. We have our senses in control. But when the testing time comes, do we pass or not? So he says, using this pratipakshabhavana, you can keep on rising up and up in the firmness of these practices. So this verse number 34 in chapter number 2, that's where we're going to start. This is the second part of explanation or elaboration on that pratipakshabhavana. Vitarkaa hinsadayah kritakaritanumodita lobhakrodhamohapoorvaka mridumadhyadhimatra duhkhajnananantafala iti pratipakshabhavanam. Vitarkaa, afflicting thoughts, thoughts full of doubt and contradictions. Hinsa adi, violence, etc. Krit means done, karit means made to do. Anumodita, consented. Lobh is greed, krodh is anger, moha, delusion, purvaka, preceded by. Mridu is mild, like gentle, madhya, intermediate, adhimatra, exceedingly intense. Dukh means pain, agyan means ignorance, misunderstanding. Anant, endless, falaha, fruits or results. Iti means thus, pratipaksha, opposite, counteracting. Bhavanam, thinking. So it's an act of willful thinking, not just a habitual thinking. So the translation of this long verse is, violence and the others are afflicting thoughts. We put these thoughts into action by ourselves, through others, or by implied consent. These thoughts are propelled by greed, anger, or confusion or delusion. They could be mild, intermediate, or intense. We nullify these afflicting thoughts by realizing they bear unending fruits of pain and ignorance. Okay? So this is the direct translation of this verse. So in this sutra, Rishi Patanjali outlines the dynamics of afflicting thoughts and the destructive actions resulting from them. So he is really giving us a groundwork for a contemplative practice to nullify these afflicting thoughts. Sure, he is using the example of violence, hinsa, but we go through others also, not just only hinsa. When we lie also, when we cheat also, when we have a jealousy also. So all these feelings, they gain momentum and demand action. So he is telling us that to use this pratipakshabhavanam, because these negative tendencies reside in our mind and they emerge as feelings. 3 different ways. By involving ourselves directly in an act of violence, we create more and more karmas. Or by inciting others to violence, or consenting to violence silently. All 3 ways. And acts of violence are instigated by greed, anger, confusion, and most of the time, the combinations of all these. The consequences of such actions are determined by the intensity. That's why he said it could be mild, it could be intermediate, or it could be intense. 3 ways violence is carried out. The 3 mental conditions of greed, anger, and confusion. They underlie the violence. And the 3 degrees of intensity. And we can see that how many different combination and permutation we can have of violence and the others also. So the purpose of this elaborate discussion is to help us detect the element of these negative tendencies in us. And we need to design a plan for pratipakshabhavanam. That means cultivating thoughts that oppose and eventually nullify afflicting thoughts. So cultivation of thoughts contrary to those that need to be eliminated begins with realizing that negative tendencies and actions bear unending fruit of pain and ignorance. And none of us want the pain. We don't want to stay ignorant. Many of us have mastered the art of justifying our negative tendencies and behavior. We have really mastered the art of ignoring the voice of our inner heart. We fail to realize that our negative tendencies and behavior have painful consequences. We learned the law of karma in this chapter, verse number 12 to 16. Rishi Patanjali told us that if a negative action is propelled by intense greed, anger, confusion, or a combination of these, and if it's carried out intensely, then unending pain quickly follows. 2 kinds of negative tendencies our rishis have told us. Swalap and Maha. Swalap is like a little. It's almost like a little enemy. And Maha is a big enemy. Afflicting thoughts of a gross nature can be easy to detect. They belong to the first category. They can be destroyed, transformed with the practice of Kriya Yoga. And what is a Kriya Yoga? According to Rishi Patanjali, Tap, Swadhyaya, Ishwar Pranidhan. That's a Kriya Yoga. But afflicting thoughts, which are Maha. Maha means they are big and they have become very subtle. They cannot be so easily detected. They can be destroyed or transformed only through meditation. But the desire to eliminate our negative tendencies, both little and big, begins with contemplating on unavoidable consequences of these tendencies. That means that negative tendencies will definitely bear a negative fruit. We got to remember that. That is a law. We cannot avoid it. Just let's look at the example. Excuse me. When a killer commits violence, could be killing a human being or killing of an animal. Killing is a killing. First, that killer subdues his victim, damages the victim's self-confidence and self-trust. He is putting his victim in a state of fear. Excuse me, draining the victim's vitality. And then he inflicts pain by striking with the weapon. When the pain gets intensified, that victim dies. So the act of violence in this example has three distinct stages. Draining vitality, inflicting pain, and causing death. What are the karmic consequences which will emerge? They are also in three distinct stages. The killer must suffer from lack of vitality, strength, and stamina, sooner or later. Must inherit a mind full of fear. Must suffer from low self-esteem. Lacking self-trust, he must rely on the opinions of others and remain indecisive. Because he has inflicted pain, the killer must be born in a species in which, by design of nature, life is painful. Because he has caused death, the killer must suffer a prolonged and painful death. This is a pretty graphic description of a violent act. And this is the law of karma we really cannot avoid. That's why we have to live a life in this human body mindfully. The process of dying brings our conscious forward, forcing us to face ourselves. We are led to a state of consciousness that affords no room for denying our deeds. That's why we often hear that there's a picture, rolling picture in front of the person who's dying. But as we have seen, if practiced correctly, pratipakshabhavanam can help us transcend the unending chain of afflictions and reclaim our self-luminous mind. So the discussion of violence is just one example. The pratipakshabhavanam applies equally to the remaining restraints. Restraints are what? The yams. And also for the niyams, observances. He is reminding us that refraining from bad deeds stops us from creating future bad karmas. but only pratipakshabhavanam, actively practicing the principles which oppose the impressions of afflicting actions. That's how we can eliminate the root causes of our undesirable destiny. Cannot go in the past, but in the present, we can definitely clean up our psyche. We have a chance. This is what the sadhana is all about. In the following 11 sutras, Rishi Patanjali is describing the extraordinary results of practicing pratipakshabhavanam, where we learn to master the 10 yams and the niyams. So let's look at it. Start with verse number 35. He's talking about ahimsa first. Ahimsapratishthayam tatsannidhau vairatyagah. Ahimsa, non-violence, pratishthyam, upon being established. Tat means that, sannidhau, the presence of. Vair means animosity, tyag means renunciation or absence. In the company of a yogi, established in non-violence. Animosity vanishes. So these are pretty bold statements Rishi Patanjali is making in this as well as the next 10 sutras. But the key word is truly established, though. Not just only memorizing that we got to be non-violent, but truly being non-violent in the actions also, words also, and thoughts also. If you are truly established in the principle of non-violence, the feeling of animosity in those around you will vanish. Not just only human beings, but the animals also. They feel that too. The vibration of peace, non-violence. And we'll see that in the next 10 verses. If you have been practicing truth, the Satya, your words will materialize. Pretty bold statement. Then he will tell us, when you embody the principle of non-stealing, prosperity will abide with you. The next one is, with the perfection of brahmacharya, you will gain the ability to transmit spiritual power to others, other seekers. When you adhere firmly to the principle of non-possessiveness, you will gain complete knowledge of the cycle of birth and death. That is a aparigraha. The practice of shauch, that is the first niyam, will empower you to detect even the slightest impurity in your body and the bodies of the others. That becomes the ground for much higher accomplishments. That means purification of your mind, purification of your intellect, ego, cultivation of a positive mind, mental concentration, mastery of the senses, and finally direct realization. All from shauch. Then he will tell us mastery of contentment, santosh, will take us to the pinnacle of happiness. We all want to be happy. We think that we can run towards the world and we can be happy. Over here, Rishi Patanjali is making a bold statement. Contentment will give you the utmost happiness. And tap, austerity, the destruction of impurities through austerity will lead you to bodily perfections. He will tell us that extraordinary beauty, charm, strength, and self-healing powers, they come from tapasya. Next one, he tells us, The swadhyaya, self-study, will cause celestial beings to visit you. Your Ishta Devata will be standing right in front of you. Swadhyaya. And finally, faith and surrender to Ishwar will grant you the highest yogic reward. Samadhi. Samadhi siddhir Ishwar pranidhanat. But remember that all this can be achieved with sadhana by bringing that pratipakshabhavanam. It is very difficult for those who are not familiar with the yogic philosophy and metaphysics to believe that the simple practice of non-violence or contentment, for example, can make you achieve all these powers. But we got to have faith that these achievements are obtainable, because this great Rishi is reminding us throughout the entire text actually. It's not just a one sutra or two sutra. Again and again he is telling us that our core being is absolutely pure and self-luminous. We are different from Ishwar only in the sense that we are caught in the cycle of birth and death. And we are caught in the cycle of birth and death because of our own avidya, ignorance. Nature has given us a wonderful mind as a tool to discover our relationship with Ishwar and for ourselves. The luminosity of our mind is identical to the luminosity of our core being actually. That's why mind is also called a Devata. Our mind has inherited all the qualities and powers of a Prakriti, and this Prakriti is Ishwar's Prakriti, the intrinsic power of Ishwar. So with all these practices, we can make our mind clean, pristine. We don't have to get rid of the mind, but we got to learn how to clean the mind. The problem we face is that at this stage in our evolution, our mind and core being have become intermingled. Our mind no longer exhibits the boundless richness of the Ishwar as well as the Prakriti. There are numberless layers of vasanas on our mind, and we feel very limited. And what are those layers? Layers of doubt, layer of fear, and the subtle impressions of our past experiences. These limitations are outgrowths of avidya. And we have forgotten our real self for a long, long time. Avidya has veiled our understanding regarding our transmigratory nature. The role of the mind in discovering life's purpose and the forces that govern and guide our mental and physical activities, we got to remember. Avidya's immediate manifestations is what? We learned it before. Distorted sense of self-identity. That means thinking that I am the body. It's all because of avidya. Then attachment, aversion, fear. Vidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh. We learned these kleshas. They all started from avidya. These kleshas or afflictions churn our deepest mental tendencies. And our actions are almost invariably propelled by our deep-rooted afflictions, subtle impressions created by our own actions. But we don't want to accept that. When the pain comes, we want to just think that somebody else has caused it. Because of something else, I'm going through this trouble. But a yogi goes deep within and sees that, what did I do? My own Guruji used to say, kritam samar. I must have done something. Take the responsibility. Only then you can move forward. Kritam samar. In response to the demands of all these kleshas, we become compulsively. We act compulsively without understanding what is happening inside us or around us. That's how this mind becomes weak. The power of discernment goes away. No capacity to see that there's a core being, and that is my duty to know that I am that core being. And we feel helpless. That's how mind loses sight of its inherent Shakti. So Rishi Patanjali and other yogis, other gurus, they remind us again and again. But it's up to us to follow the guidelines which are laid down by these rishis. So especially in this part, this is a chapter about the sadhana. So we got to be sure that we are doing the sadhana. So the sutras 33 and 34, by practicing yam and niyams, we can help our mind free from its acquired incapacity, and we can reclaim our inherent capacity. That's what he's telling us. Pratipakshabhavanam. Remember, this practice of ours has to be very active. Active, not passive. Only an active practice has the power to nullify the layers of our afflictions. That's why following Kriya Yoga also, Tapa Swadhyay Ishwar Pranidhan, and then double it up with the meditation. Because some afflictions are mild, and that some afflictions are very deep-rooted. And as the inherent capacities of our mind return, we will experience our core being more clearly. There won't be any doubt who we are. We are no longer afraid that anything can damage us, because the core essence of us is part of God. It cannot be damaged. It's part of God. So this level of clarity we got to establish with our practice. This intrinsic luminosity of the mind is no longer obstructed with a proper practice, proper sadhana. The mind begins to command the body, mind, senses, entire objective world, and can bear the ultimate fruit. The fruits which Rishi Patanjali is giving it to us in this series of 11 verses. So in this sutra, Rishi Patanjali is describing the ultimate fruit of ahimsa. And what is that? Elimination of animosity. And we know, we have talked about this violence is accompanied by fear and anger, which are caused and propelled by desire and aversion. Okay, see, violent acts don't happen by themselves. There are some underlying reasons. And desire and aversion come from attachment, which forces us to cling to our possession. And this is all contained in our self-identity. And self-identity as our family, property, religion, intellectual advancements, professional reputation, power, charisma, those are all trappings of our self-identity. And from the yogic perspective, that's all asmita, distorted sense of self-identity and enveloped in avidya. And I'm sure you have memorized all these terms and understand the deep implication of these. Because for most of us, this distorted self-identity really constitutes our personal world. That's what we see, that's what we feel. And prospect of losing it is very frightening for us. But with this sadhana, we got to rise above it. This phenomena is in our inner world also and outer world also. But at the dawn of enlightenment, even the idea of defending our self-identity evaporates. And that's how the attachments, desire, aversion lose their foundation. And as this foundation crumbles, animosity disappears. We are automatically transformed and transported to a state of ahimsa. So these are not just the terms, this is a sadhana we need to go through by understanding what we learned earlier. So the maturity of the state of ahimsa depends solely on the practice of pratipakshabhavanam and meditation. How completely the power of ahimsa will nullify animosity in the world around us. Because often we look at that hinsa outside, others are hurting. Why there are wars? Why people are killing each other? It has to start from us. We have control over us. And then if we do our own sadhana, and more people, if they do the sadhana, only then we'll see the effect of that in the outer world. We are responsible for our own establishment in this ahimsa. So it's important to remind ourselves, perfection in non-violence is an outcome of the highest level of spiritual achievement. And it arises as we enter deeper levels of meditation and matures when we taste samadhi. Okay, keep on doing the sadhana by understanding this. So in the context of our day-to-day practice, the principle of non-violence is a powerful tool for transforming ourselves. That's how we become good human beings. We don't like to be in the company of a person who's violent. And if we practice this, we will accelerate our growth, both as individuals and as members of this society. So ahimsa. Let's look at next verse, verse number 36. It's about truthfulness. Satya. Satyapratishthayam kriyafal ashrayatvam. Satya means the truth. Pratishthyam, upon being established. Kriya means action. Phal means fruit. Ashrayatvam, the essence of the ground. So that means the ground for the fructification of the action. When a yogi is established in truthfulness, actions begin to bear fruit. Those actions could be physical actions, thoughts, the words, at all three levels of actions. So in this sutra, Rishi Patanjali claims that when we are established in truth, actions expressed will materialize. So the primordial Prakriti is infinitely rich in every aspect. It is eternally, spontaneously aware of the intensive and the intentions of Ishwar. Prakriti responds to Ishwar's intention. So when a person, a yogi, is connected with Ishwar, then of course whatever yogi says, it will materialize. Prakriti will have to follow. In other words, the Prakriti manifests in perfect accordance with Ishwar. So Prakriti is Ishwar's Prakriti. So our mind responds to the intention of our core being, provided our mind is pristine though. If our mind has doubts, if our mind is selfish, if our mind is jealous, it cannot connect with Ishwar or to the Ishwar's Prakriti. Our luminous mind senses our intention instantly. So when the mind has no resistance to that intention, its inherent powers and attributes transform the intention into a living reality. Living reality. That's how we just go to gurus, get the blessings. Because we know that their blessings, they will come true. The words they speak, they come true. Words are reflections of our thoughts. Thoughts originate in the depths of our consciousness. Before they turn into action, thoughts flash in our mind as words. And when the mind is free from afflicting thoughts and feelings, thoughts and the words corresponding to them flow forth without losing their potency. For example, when the Ishwar saw darkness and thought of light, he uttered, "Let there be light." And there was light. When Jesus invoked Moses and Elijah, they appeared instantly. The science of mantra rests on the principle of revelation, which in turn stands on pragya. Pragya word we learned in Bhagavad Gita also. Intuitive wisdom. Pragya is not confined by the forces of time, space, and the law of cause and effect. It is beyond the domain of sensory perception. Pragya. So that's why we have to transcend the lower to reach the higher. It's even beyond inference, postulation, or even the scriptural exhortations. We learned in the first chapter this pragya word too. You should go back, chapter 1, verse 47 to 50. And then in this chapter also, chapter 2, verse number 27. Pragya dawns when the mind is free from afflictions and the mental tendencies arising from them. And in that state, what remains? Only the truth remains. And riding the waves of the mind's luminosity, truth radiates outward. So in this state, only the finest words from the finest of the languages present themselves to our mind. Because our mind is ultra refined. It's enlightened. It selects those words as a conduit to transport the intention of outwardly radiating truth. And this is how those mantras were also revealed by those rishis. And after thousands and thousands of years, we see the power in those words, in those mantras. A yogi with the direct experience of this process is a rishi, a seer. What he experiences is mantra. And where did it come from? From the pristine nature of the truth, Satya. So whatever he spoke, whatever came out became the truth. Because there's a pristine nature of the intention, pristine nature of the mind, pristine nature of the word, and the pristine nature of the entire process. Nothing can obstruct, alter, or compromise the transformative effect of the mantra. Here, there, everywhere, they have the power. And we'll see further in chapter 4 something related to it. That blessings of a yogi who is fully established in truth. Practitioners who are still attempting to experience, because most of us are just trying to get established into Satya, we have to watch ourselves. Are we firmly established? Or we just give it up very easily? That's why we need a very methodical practice for applying this principle of truth in daily life. It's not just once in a while, all the time. We can start out writing a journal. In the last 24 hours, where did I fail? How many times I lied or thought of lying? Because this practice of being established on the truthfulness, it begins with not lying. Because this lying has become a habit for us. And we justify it very quickly. Sometimes we say to save somebody or to make somebody happy. But you're hurting yourself. You're slipping on the path. Is it worth it? Once we resolve not to lie, we begin to see the subtle causes of lying. This is when the practice of pratipakshabhavanam, cultivating thoughts opposite to those that compel us to lie, become applicable. So the practice of pratipakshabhavanam in regard to truth begins with reminding ourselves how one lie leads to 10 more lies. It's almost like an unending cycle of pain and ignorance. One lie. Do we want to take a chance when we are starting to walk on this path? I'm sure your answer will be no. So pratipakshabhavanam coupled with the proper practice of meditation gradually leads us to a state in which we find ourselves fully established in truth. So today we looked at the benefits of being fully established in ahimsa and fully established in satya. These are the first two steps on this ladder of yoga. Okay, first two steps, but these two, actually these are sub steps of yam. Okay, ahimsa, satya. And next week we'll start with asteya, non-stealing, with verse number 37. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.